Welcome to the deep dive. Today we are undertaking a truly challenging mission, a thorough, in-depth analysis of these excerpts from The Art of Seduction.
And it's crucial right from the start to frame this correctly for you listening.
Yeah.
We're approaching this not as, a dating guide or relationship advice, not at all.
Definitely not. It's much more a systematic study of psychological power, influence, persuasion, really, often at its most, well, advanced and maybe even ruthless level.
That distinction is absolutely critical. The source material itself, it defines seduction as the ultimate form of power precisely because it bypasses conventional force. It doesn't strong-arm you.
Right. It goes straight for the mind.
Exactly. It aims directly for the mind, stimulating these deep-seated fantasies, stirring the unconscious, and ultimately dismantling the target's conscious willpower. It's quite something.
And the vocabulary used throughout these sources, it's striking, isn't it? We see these early accounts comparing the techniques, especially of history's great seductresses, to a kind of subtle, almost feminine form of military warfare.
Yeah, it's framed very strategically. It's about cogs and wheels, patience, cunning, strategic planning, all aimed at the conquest of a mind.
It's persuasion through pleasure, as you said.
Precisely. And what's fascinating, I think, is the constant nature of this approach, what the source calls the seducer's mindset.
The mindset.
A
Okay.
successful seducer, according to this, never views their methods as something they just turn on and off for specific occasions.
Right. It's always active.
Always. Every interaction, every glance, every conversation is seen as a potential point of influence, a potential seduction in this broad sense.
So it's a constant performance.
It's more like a constant attitude. And this constant attitude, it generates this aura of self-contained momentum and, frankly, supreme confidence.
They treat the world as their stage, or,
Ah,
I think the source colorfully puts it, their bedroom.
that's the phrase, yes. They are always on, always in character, always prepared.
So for you, the listener, our goal today is, well, it's ambitious. We want you to understand the intricate psychological mechanics behind attraction and influence.
And not just in personal life.
No, exactly. Recognizing these dynamics not just in intimate settings, but seeing how they translate to mass persuasion, how media, politics, business, how they often aim to bypass your rational consciousness and stir your unconscious needs and desires.
And we'll begin our deep dive by looking at the very foundation of it all, the character structure that makes any successful seduction possible in the first place.
So seduction, as we're learning, it's rarely about some obvious, clumsy maneuver. It seems it has to start with a deeply rooted, consistent quality, the character.
Yes, something that radiates outward, attracting people and stirring their emotions in a way that genuinely feels beyond their rational control. It has to feel almost elemental.
And if that core character is compelling enough,
Then the subsequent strategic moves, the manipulations, the calculated distance, the things that might otherwise seem suspect, they often go completely unnoticed.
because the victim is already hooked.
They're already hooked. They're reacting to what feels like a force of nature, not a conscious trick.
Okay, so the source outlines 9 primary character archetypes, defined by their core attractive trait. We should probably, go beyond just listing them. The differences in their appeal seem key.
Absolutely. The specific flavor of attraction is everything. So we start with what you might call the explosive power types. There's the siren,
Pure sexual energy.
distilled sexual energy, yes. Then the rake, whose charisma stems from this insatiable, almost dangerous desire.
And the ideal lover.
Right, who uses an almost aesthetic sensibility, refinement, to reflect the target's highest ideals back at them, like a perfect mirror.
Okay, those are quite distinct.
Yeah.
Then you have the more elusive types.
Yes, so the ones who draw you in through mystery. The dandy, defined by this ambiguous allure, refusing easy categorization. They play with expectations.
And the star.
The star cultivates an ethereal, mysterious distance. They always seem just slightly out of reach, making you want to bridge that gap.
Then there are the more social, maybe more accessible types.
Correct. You've got the charmer, the ultimate social creature who just knows how to make others feel comfortable, important, seen.
And the charismatic.
Defined by this unusual self-confidence and intense, passionate belief in something, could be anything, that draws people in like a magnet. It's infectious.
Right. And finally, the last 2 seem focused more on emotional authenticity, or maybe the appearance of it.
That's a good way to put it. The natural, whose appeal is this spontaneous, almost childlike openness. It feels unguarded, irresistible.
And the coquette.
The coquette, who maintains this fascinating, self-sufficient Cool through strategic withholding, hot and cold.
So the big takeaway here, it seems, is consistency. You have to pick a lane.
That's what the source argues. The power of these characters comes from their consistency. You can't effectively be a dandy one day and a natural the next. The allure requires this unwavering presentation of a specific, heightened psychological trait.
Okay, that makes sense. It builds a reliable expectation almost. Which leads us then to the crucial first strategic step, choosing the right victim.
Yes. Seduction, as it's described, is a process over time. It requires patience, focus, strategic thinking. So, the choice of target is absolutely critical. Where do they start looking?
Look for a void, right?
Exactly, a void. The source is very clear. You cannot seduce a completely contented person. It's almost impossible.
Why is that?
Because the ideal victim must have some kind of deep-seated psychological lack you can fill. This lack often comes from unhappiness, isolation, maybe a feeling of worthlessness. If they feel completely whole, content, well, you have nothing to offer them, psychologically speaking.
So the seducer is essentially acting like a brilliant diagnostician of emotional holes.
That's a great way to frame it. People don't fall in love in this model because they admire your virtue or your accomplishments necessarily.
No.
They fall in love because they sense a profound gap in their own character or their life, which they subconsciously hope the seducer will complete or validate.
That's quite a cynical view of love, isn't it?
It's certainly a strategic one. And the source points out this idea has ancient roots. It goes back to the Diotima-Socrates lineage, the origin myth of eros, of love itself.
Ah, tell me more about that.
Well, in Plato's Symposium, Diotima teaches Socrates that eros is born of poros, contrivance or resourcefulness, and patinia, poverty or need. Love, eros, is by definition motivated by seeking what is lacking.
So if you have no poverty, no need.
You cannot be moved by eros, by love, or by seduction in this framework. You need that sense of lack for the dynamic to even begin.
Wow, that really reframes the whole process, doesn't it? It flips it. This seducer's power isn't so much in their own strength, but in their ability to expertly identify the victim's weakness, their need.
Precisely. And speaking of weakness, or perhaps unexpected dynamics, the source notes a crucial kind of counterintuitive element here, tension as erotic potential.
Tension. How does that work? Like, shouldn't the target like you?
Not necessarily, not right away. The perfect target, it suggests, might not immediately adore you. They might even harbor a slight fear or dislike or maybe just ambivalence towards you.
And that's good.
It's full of potential. This tension, this friction, makes the seduction much livelier, much more engaging. An easy, immediate agreement often lacks excitement.
Ah, so it's the uncertainty, the feeling that they shouldn't be drawn to you.
Exactly. That internal conflict makes the eventual conquest, if it happens, feel much more profound, more earned, more dramatic. It creates an internal story for the victim.
Okay, I see. It's the challenge that generates the spark. Now, let's flip the coin. We need to talk about the necessary negative example. Those who repel influence, the ones the source calls the anti-seducer. What defines them?
Fundamentally, they're defined by extreme insecurity, but it manifests as intense self-absorption.
So insecurity makes them self-absorbed.
Paradoxically, yes. They repel others because they are utterly incapable of grasping another person's psychology. They lack that crucial inner self-awareness to recognize when they're imposing or pestering or just being monumentally boring.
They sound like the opposite of the charmer.
The complete antithesis. The charmer focuses entirely on making the victim feel important. The anti-seducer is trapped in their own needs and perspective.
And the types are probably instantly recognizable, I imagine, like the windbag.
Oh, absolutely. Seduction, as we've discussed, thrives on suggestion, looks, indirect actions. Too much unsolicited talk, especially talk centered only on oneself, just kills the mood.
That's how
It heightens surface differences, it brings conscious thought crashing back in, and it breaks that delicate, irrational spell you're trying to weave. Talk pulls you out of the fantasy.
The windbag just assumes everyone finds their life fascinating.
Pretty much. They lack that critical inner voice, that little editor that wonders, am I dominating this? Am I boring you?
Yeah.
They prioritize their own need to express over the victim's need to imagine and fantasize.
Right. And the second major type of repellent figure, the inattentive.
Yes. The source argues quite strongly that nothing is more infuriating or damaging to any kind of positive influence, let alone seduction, than prolonged neglect or obliviousness.
And the ultimate historical illustration given here is Emperor Claudius and his wife, Messalina.
A truly tragic and, frankly, bizarre example. Claudius, as the story goes, cultivated a persona of manufactured imbecility.
He acted foolish. Why?
Well, early in his life, under emperors like Tiberius and Caligula, acting like a harmless, bumbling fool was probably a survival strategy. It helped him avoid the political purges that took down more obviously ambitious relatives.
And this act became real.
It seems it became second nature, yeah. And this manufactured oblivion extended even into his most intimate relationships. He seemed utterly oblivious to his young, famously beautiful wife, Messalina.
Just didn't notice her.
Apparently so. His insensitivity, his lack of attention, didn't just break any potential spell. The source argues it actually created hatred in her.
Hatred, that's strong.
Think about it. Messalina was reportedly one of the most desirable women in Rome, and Claudius's total lack of attention apparently drove her mad. How could this physically unimpressive older man possibly ignore her?
So she acted out.
Dramatically. She grew increasingly debauched and reckless. The most famous story is her challenging the most notorious prostitute in Rome to an endurance competition, right there in the palace, supposedly just to feel something, to provoke some kind of reaction from him or the world.
Wow. So his inattention pushed her towards self-destruction.
That's the interpretation given. His prolonged inattention essentially forced her into extreme behavior, simply to elicit a response, to prove she existed, to feel seen. It highlights the deep lesson. Inattention breeds resentment, pushes the target into an adversarial position, and completely destroys any chance of persuasion or positive connection.
So the foundation is clear then. Seduction, in this view, is built on radiating a consistent character, strategically targeting a specific psychological void, and it collapses instantly the moment that crucial outward focus shifts back onto the self, whether through excessive talk or just plain neglect.
Exactly. Get the foundation wrong and nothing else works.
Okay, so now we move into some specific archetypes, the ones that seem to rely most heavily on strategic ambiguity, the power of not being quite what you seem or what's expected. And we start with perhaps the most foundational feminine archetype, the siren.
Yes, the siren. Historically, figures like Helen of Troy, Cixi in China, Cleopatra. The source suggests they essentially invented these psychological methods of indirect influence.
Their power wasn't brute force.
Not at all. It was cunning, psychological, and it's often confused, I think, with just straightforward physical beauty. But the source makes a point of noting that neither Cleopatra nor, say, Marilyn Monroe were considered classical beauties in their time.
Really? So what was their power then?
It was psychological because they mastered the art of stimulating desire for a fantasy figure, not just for the woman herself as she was.
A fantasy, okay. How did Cleopatra do that? The Cleopatra model is presented as the ultimate case study, right?
It is. She meticulously crafted this alluring appearance. She'd often pose as a goddess, like Isis. She used costumes, settings, perfumes, offering these tantalizing glimpses of flesh, but always within a highly controlled, almost theatrical presentation.
So it was performance.
A very high-level performance. And crucially, she used this persona, this aura, to lure powerful men like Julius Caesar and Mark Antony away from their serious masculine world, the world of war, duty, politics.
And into her world.
Into her feminine world of opulent pleasure, luxury, refinement, sensual delight. She made them feel like they were escaping the burdens and responsibilities of their power, entering a realm of pure pleasure.
But that wasn't the whole strategy, was it? It wasn't just about indulgence.
No, that's the critical turn. Just as they were completely hooked, completely immersed in these sensual pleasures, she would strategically withdraw.
Pull back.
A sudden moment of coldness, maybe indifference. A strategic fit of sadness or anger that seemed to come out of nowhere. This confusing alternation intense heat, followed by inexplicable coldness, it completely disarmed these powerful, rational men.
And forced them into pursuit.
Exactly. It forced these great men of the world into desperate pursuit, trying to understand, trying to win back the favors, the warmth they had just tasted. The uncertainty drove them crazy.
It's that combination, isn't it? Overwhelming heat, then freezing cold. It bypasses the rational mind.
Completely. And this is where the siren uses physicality to bypass reason. It's not just about looking good. Physical qualities, a specific scent, carefully cultivated movement, a heightened femininity achieved through sophisticated appearance and manner, these act as powerful, almost primal decoys.
They hit you on a non-rational level.
Precisely. They bypass the logical, conscious brain and speak directly to desire and instinct.
There's that specific example of Shi, the Chinese siren. That seems almost like a state-sponsored seduction.
It really does. King Kuchan selected her specifically, the story goes, to destroy his rival, King Fuchai, not with an army, but through pure distraction.
And she was trained for it.
Meticulously instructed, apparently, in the arts of suggestive, graceful movement, posture, even sighing. It was all about creating an aura.
And when she was deployed against King Fuchai,
Her whole demeanor, the source calls it her tremulous presence, the way she moved, this effortless, languid grace, it completely obsessed him. He saw her not just as a woman, but as a living, moving work of art that demanded his full, undivided attention.
and the consequences.
He neglected his kingdom, his duties, his advisors, his other wives, fixated purely on her cultivated presence until his kingdom basically just fell apart from neglect.
Wow. Pure psychological consumption achieved through staging.
Exactly. Careful staging of physical presence and movement. Now, shifting gears completely, we turn to the chaotic, masculine master of ambiguity, the rake.
The rake. He's a fascinating figure because the source claims he fulfills a fundamental female fantasy.
How
so?
Well, the rake is often presented as amoral, disloyal, fundamentally a slave to his own pleasure. He's bad news, right?
Sounds like it.
But T, in the moment of desire, his focus on the woman is supposedly so intense, so absolute, that he will move mountains for her, go to the ends of the earth. He offers an intensity that the cautious, predictable, perhaps domesticated male doesn't.
So it's the intensity, the danger.
The danger is key. The word rake itself, the source reminds us, comes from rate hell, one who supposedly rakes the coals of hell. That association with the forbidden, the slightly evil, the dangerous, it's presented as immensely alluring.
Why? What's the appeal of danger?
It offers the victim a chance to partake in something risky, thrilling, outside the bounds of normal, safe life. It's exciting.
And rakes are apparently experts at exploiting the reformer complex.
Oh, absolutely. This is the idea that many women harbor a secret belief that they will be the one special person who can finally tame the wild creature, domesticate the rake that no other woman could handle.
Like with Lord Byron. He was a notorious rake.
Exactly. Byron constantly scandalized Europe with his affairs and behavior, but women were still intensely drawn to him, perhaps partly believing they could be the one to save him or reform him.
And when the rake gets caught, when his bad behavior comes out.
He instantly falls back on strategic weakness. This is crucial. He doesn't typically defend himself aggressively. Instead, he presents himself as the victim of his own uncontrollable passions, his own inability to change.
Making himself seem pathetic, almost.
Pathetic but irresistibly flawed. This feeds the victim's vanity and sense of exceptionalism. She understands him, she pities him, she feels uniquely equipped to handle this tortured soul. It makes her feel powerful.
Clever. But the rake's ultimate weapon, apparently, is his reputation. It has to be carefully crafted.
Absolutely. The source stresses, never downplay a bad name, enhance it, cultivate it.
What should the reputation project?
Essentially 3 things. First, irresistible attractiveness. Second, a clear disdain for convention and rules. And third, an uncontrollable devotion to pleasure, often sexual pleasure, a sense of rebellion.
And the example given is the Duc de Richelieu.
A master of this. He apparently made his conquests as public as possible, often boasting about them, letting the stories spread.
And that didn't deter women.
Quite the opposite. It excited them. It created this competitive, almost irresistible desire to join the exclusive club of the seduced to prove that they could capture the attention of the famous, elusive rake. The reputation precedes him and does half the seductive work before he even meets the target.
The reputation itself becomes the lure. Okay. Finally, in this group focused on ambiguity, we find the dandy.
Yes, the dandy. Dandies excite us, the source argues, because they seem to embody a radical kind of freedom that many people crave but rarely achieve in their own lives.
How do they embody freedom?
By refusing to be easily categorized, they often play with masculinity and femininity, creating a startling self-fashioned physical image through clothes, mannerisms, style. They stand out.
They're not just about sexual seduction, though, right?
No, they are often social seducers as well. Groups, cliques, even artistic movements can form around them. Why? Because they project this supreme disinterest in what others are doing or what's currently fashionable.
They set the trends by ignoring them.
In a way, yes. They poke fun at current trends, display this total self-contained confidence in their own unique persona. This rejection of convention, this apparent self-sufficiency, attracts imitation. People want to be near that confidence.
It's the illusion of total self-possession.
Yeah.
They seem to exist only for themselves, and we want a piece of that freedom.
Exactly. However, there's a crucial limit. They must measure out their impudence, their insolence, very carefully. This is the lesson of Beau Brummel.
Ah, the famous dandy. What happened with him?
Brummel was the absolute arbiter of fashion and wit in Regency England, largely due to the patronage of his friend, the Prince of Wales, the future King George
Oh, so he
IV.
was dependent on the prince.
Deeply dependent. But Brummel's wit sometimes got the better of his judgment. When the prince gained a lot of weight, Brummel, in public, apparently said something like, "Who's your fat friend?" Or the famous line asking someone else to "do ring Big Ben," referring to the prince.
Ouch. That crossed the line.
A fatal line. It went from theatrical, amusing teasing to a genuine public insult directed at a man who held immense power.
And the consequences for Brummel.
The prince was deeply offended and instantly cut him off completely. Without that royal patronage, Brummel's social standing evaporated. He fled England to escape creditors, fell into poverty, and eventually died in obscurity and madness in France.
Wow. So it proves the dandy's freedom is largely performative.
It has to be.
Yeah.
It must amuse and intrigue, but it must never genuinely challenge or offend those who hold the real reins of power. Ambiguity has its limits when confronted with raw authority.
Okay, we're transitioning now into strategies that seem to target deeper emotional territory, wounds, insecurities, idealized longings. The first one is embodying the ideal lover. This sounds demanding.
It's described as incredibly taxing, yes, because it requires the seducer to focus with intense, almost obsessive effort on what the target is missing in their life or what they feel disappointed by.
And then you become that missing piece.
You become the living embodiment of that lack. You don't just offer something, you are the thing they crave. It involves elevating courtship itself into an aesthetic experience, paying scrupulous attention to details, gestures, gifts, atmosphere details, that the target's current life, maybe their partner or society, denies them.
The example given is Rudolph Valentino, the silent film star.
Yes, in the 1920s cinema, Valentino absolutely epitomized this ideal lover role for millions. His screen persona was that of a man who valued time, attention, romantic gesture above all else.
Like how?
Carefully chosen gifts, patient dancing, the meticulous, respectful way he'd take a woman's hand or gaze into her eyes on screen. He transformed the often clumsy reality of courtship into the sublime aesthetic experience.
And the source notes, interestingly, that other men hated him for this.
They supposedly did, because women, after seeing Valentino on screen, now had this heightened expectation of romantic patience, attentiveness, and artistry that most real-life men couldn't or wouldn't live up to.
So Valentino's power was precisely in highlighting that gap.
Exactly. He held up this shimmering ideal of romance that many felt had been lost or dismissed in the modern industrial age. He appealed directly to women's perhaps crushed romantic aspirations.
And this mechanism, appealing to ideals, it scales up. It works in mass seduction too,
Right.
like in politics.
Perfectly. This source uses John F. Kennedy as a prime example. His whole Camelot aura wasn't really about specific policies, not primarily. It was about appealing to America's lost ideals.
Lost ideals. Like what?
Well, the argument is that America in the late 1950s felt prosperous, maybe comfortable, but also perhaps a bit conformist, spiritually adrift. Kennedy consciously evoked the pioneer spirit, the new frontier, creating things like the Peace Corps.
So he was reflecting back a better version of America to itself.
Precisely. He reflected America's profound, perhaps subconscious, national aspiration to be noble again, to be mission-driven, idealistic, youthful, vigorous. People didn't just vote for him. The source suggests they metaphorically fell in love with the idealized reflection he provided them.
He made the collective feel good about itself, fulfilling a kind of national ego ideal. Fascinating. Okay, next, let's examine the mastery of psychological distance. The coquette. Their core strategy is never give them what they fully want.
Pretty much never offer total predictable satisfaction. The coquette maintains eternal desirability by imitating this alternating pattern. Intense heat and engagement, followed by sudden, confusing coldness or withdrawal.
Why does that work? Why not just be consistently nice?
Because, as the source argues, an easy conquest holds little value psychologically. Human interest, desire, it's exponentially heightened by denial, by uncertainty, by strategic withholding. What you can't quite have becomes incredibly precious.
The famous historical example here is Josephine and Napoleon.
A classic case. Josephine apparently knew exactly how to maintain this exquisite tension with Napoleon, even when he was away conquering Europe.
How did she manage that?
Her occasional unpredictable shows of sadness or anger or maybe tears even relayed in letters, these deepened Napoleon's attachment precisely because he could never quite pin her down. never feel totally secure in her affections.
Her slight coldness, even just detected in letters during his intense Italian campaign.
Reportedly drove him to distraction. He was conquering nations, but he couldn't conquer her predictable affection. He apparently viewed the chase, the effort to win and re-win her independent spirit, as almost masochistically pleasurable.
The fact that she retained a part of herself he couldn't control made her eternally valuable to him.
That seems to be the dynamic. And in this kind of interaction, the source notes something important: if the target shows anger or frustration at the coquette's behavior.
That's a bad sign.
No, it's a sure sign of their enslavement. They're frustrated because they cannot control the source of their pleasure and pain. Their emotions are hooked. The coquette retains all the initiative by making the target emotionally dependent on her fluctuating availability.
Okay, that's a powerful dynamic. And this strategy ties back somehow to Freud, the narcissism.
Yes, the source brings in the Freudian insight about narcissism. Freud observed that the narcissistic woman, the one often perceived as highly self-contained, perhaps overly concerned with her own appearance and inner world, often has the greatest magnetic effect on men.
Why would that be? Why is narcissism attractive?
Freud's theory, simplified, is that this self-containment unconsciously reminds the man of that blissful, self-sufficient phase of early infancy, before differentiation from the mother, when needs were supposedly met instantly.
So the man is drawn to her self-sufficiency, hoping.
What? Hoping that contact with her, basking in her self-contained aura, will somehow magically restore that lost feeling of total, comfortable self-involvement from infancy. It's an appeal rooted in envy and a desire for psychological regression.
Wow, that's deep. We also see this in the cold coquette type, like Andy Warhol.
Warhol is presented as a master of this, yes, a cold coquette. He created this vast psychological space around himself by remaining deliberately elusive, cool, non-committal.
How did he do that in practice?
When criticized or asked deep questions about his art or motives, he'd often respond with these famously vague, flat, cool statements like, yes, or, no, or I just do it because I like it. No explanations, no heat.
And people reacted how?
People strained intensely to fill the vacuum he created. They desperately tried to interpret the ambiguous silence, projecting their own complex theories and significance onto him and his work.
His coolness forced others to generate the heat.
Exactly. His calculated coolness suggested this deep, unshadable internal confidence that forced others, especially his followers and critics, to pursue him relentlessly, analyzing his every non-utterance, desperate for the slightest sign of recognition or clearer meaning.
Okay. Finally, in this section on psychological warfare, we examine what seems like the deepest maneuver, affecting regression.
Yes, this is described as the art of luring the target back, psychologically, to their earliest, most powerful emotional memories, often those associated with parental figures. Essentially positioning them as the needy child within the emotional dynamic you create.
Why target childhood?
Because the deepest rooted, most potent, and often most pleasurable or defining memories are frequently from earliest childhood, connected to that feeling of dependency, security, or the complexities of the Oedipal triangle. Seducers, in this model, exploit this by appealing to what's called ego-ideal regression.
Ego-ideal regression, meaning what?
Meaning the target starts to project their own ideal self, the person they wish they were, or perhaps their lost childhood ideals, onto the seducer. The seducer becomes a screen for the target's own idealized past or potential.
The example given is Madame Récamier in Chateaubriand.
Right. Madame Récamier, a famous salon hostess in beauty, successfully seduced the older, celebrated writer Chateaubriand, not by flattering his current fame, but by subtly mirroring his own idealized self-image.
Which was?
Specifically, his lamented, lost youthful self, the innocent, noble, romantic figure he constantly wrote about missing. She didn't praise the man he was. She validated the memory of the perfect young man he wished he still was.
That's much more potent, isn't it? It's not flattery. It's like a promise to restore a lost self.
Exactly. It hits a much deeper level of longing. Conversely, there's another angle on regression: the mentor-Pygmalion complex.
This sounds different. It's not about being the child.
No, this appeals to the target's desire to be the parent, the teacher, the one who dominates or reshapes another person. It fulfills their desire to play the Pygmalion role, molding their Galatea.
And the example here is Zheng Qing, who became Madame Mao.
Yes. She apparently appealed directly to Mao Zedong's immense ego and his known desire to control, educate, and mold others, particularly in communist ideology.
So she positioned herself as his student.
as the devoted, eager student, desperate to learn communism from the great master. This gave him the profound, narcissistic thrill of being the all-knowing teacher and controller.
But the critical insight here
Is that this perceived weakness on her part, her supposed need to be educated, actually allowed her to gain immense influence and eventual control within their relationship. She gained power by flattering his ego in the most fundamental way, by validating his intellectual authority and his desire to dominate. Strategic submission.
All right, so we've explored the characters and the deep psychological appeals. Now we turn to the concrete strategic playbook, the specific actions the seducer takes once that psychological foundation is hopefully laid. And the first lesson seems absolute: indirect approach and insinuation.
Absolutely critical. Avoid the obvious maneuver at all costs. Why?
Because it arouses suspicion.
Resistance.
Immediately. The seducer must begin at an angle. Move gradually. Maybe start as a friend, a confidant, an admirer, a colleague, then slowly shift the dynamic towards lover. The key is that the target only becomes aware of the shift gradually, almost imperceptibly.
So they don't see it coming until it's too late. Or until they want it. The analogy used is the spider's web. You don't charge at the fly. You spin the threads invisibly, subtly, and then you sit quietly, allowing the victim to wander in and ensnare themselves.
There's a quote from Ninon de L'Enclos, the famous French courtesan.
Yes. She believed very strongly that a woman, or presumably anyone, is better persuaded by what she guesses or infers or assumes than by what she is overtly told.
Declare your feelings too early.
And you provoke mistrust, defensiveness, you show your hand, let them figure it out, or think they figured it out.
A great example of this passive, indirect approach is Lausanne and the Grande Mademoiselle.
A magnificent example. Lausanne, a known courtier and ladies' man, cultivated an intense, dedicated friendship with the very wealthy and powerful Grande Mademoiselle, who was Louis XIV's cousin.
Just friendship. For how long?
For months, apparently. They talked poetry, history, court gossip, philosophy. He poured energy into the friendship, but made no obvious romantic or sexual advances.
Which must have made her wonder.
Exactly. Why was this consummate ladies' man not trying to seduce her? He was handsome, charming. The sustained platonic effort, combined with the glaring lack of direct moves, built enormous tension and intrigue in her mind.
So she started thinking about him differently.
It led her to realize, supposedly to her own surprise, that she had actually fallen in love with him. She came to believe the desire was entirely her own invention, her own discovery.
He positioned himself perfectly, so she was forced to make the realization, and ultimately, the first real move towards romance.
He created the space for her desire to bloom, seemingly on its own. Very subtle. Next up, perhaps the centerpiece of advanced seduction strategy: creating the perfect illusion, which means confusing desire and reality.
How does it work? Why illusions?
Because, the source argues, all human beings daydream. We fantasize to compensate for the difficulties, the disappointments, the sheer mundanity of real life.
So the seducer taps into those daydreams.
They must create the tangible, believable illusion that through them, through association with them, the target can finally live out their repressed or thwarted secret wishes, their most cherished fantasies.
You become the gateway to their dream life.
You embody the possibility, and the illusion must blur the lines between desire and reality until they're almost indistinguishable. Prince Potemkin is the grand master of this on a massive scale.
With Empress Catherine the Great of Russia, right?
Yeah.
The Potemkin villages.
Exactly. Catherine harbored this deep fantasy of herself as a progressive, enlightened ruler, a peer of Voltaire, who would rapidly civilize the newly conquered territories of White Russia, modern-day Ukraine and Belarus, and eventually defeat the Ottoman Turks. It was central to her self-image.
And Potemkin, her favorite and chief minister.
Knew this fantasy intimately, so during her famous tour of the South in 1787, he created these now legendary Potemkin villages.
Which were?
Essentially vast, quickly constructed, beautiful facades of villages, bustling with apparently happy, well-dressed peasants, herds of cattle driven alongside the route, all designed to give the impression of incredible prosperity and development where little actually existed yet.
It was pure stagecraft, did Catherine know?
It's debated, but the source suggests that even when members of her inner circle or foreign ambassadors tried to point out the flimsy reality behind the facades, Catherine desperately wanted the illusion to be true.
Why?
Because it fed her deepest political fantasy, her ego ideal as the great modernizer. She would often vigorously defend the illusion because its destruction meant destroying a cherished part of her own self-image. Potemkin gave her the gift of her own fantasy made seemingly real.
Wow. The illusion is often strengthened, apparently, by the uncanny, when imagination and reality seem to blend.
Yes, when things feel slightly unreal, dreamlike. Role-playing can enhance this. Napoleon's sister, Pauline Bonaparte, was supposedly an expert at this.
How did she use role-playing?
For one German officer she wished to seduce, she created this incredibly theatrical fairy tale atmosphere. A delayed entrance, magnificent candlelit baths prepared, ethereal music, servants dressed in exotic costumes. She made it clear she wasn't just Pauline, but was playing the role of a mythical goddess or nymph.
By making it clear she was playing a role. That seems counterintuitive.
But by overtly performing the role, she invited him into a shared fantasy. He stopped seeing her as just a real person with flaws and moods and accepted her for that moment as the idealized seductress figure within their shared magical play. It licensed his own fantasy.
Okay, I see. But there are dangers when a victim's fantasy completely blinds their reason. The Rohan affair illustrates this.
Starkly. Cardinal de Rohan was pathologically obsessed with gaining the favor and attention of Queen Marie Antoinette, believing it was key to his political ascent.
He desperately wanted her approval.
Desperately. He was so blinded by this fantasy of rising through her favor that he became incredibly gullible. He readily believed forged letters, supposedly from the Queen, arranged by a con woman, the Comtesse de la Mont. He even met someone pretending to be the Queen.
Yes, he accepted a brief nighttime meeting in the gardens of Versailles with a prostitute who resembled Marie Antoinette and was coached to play the part, just murmuring a few words of encouragement.
And this desperation led him
To buy the most expensive diamond necklace ever created, believing the queen secretly wanted it but couldn't ask the king, and had chosen him, Rohan, as her confidential agent to procure it for her.
His self-deception was total.
Utterly total, fueled by his desperate fantasy. The result, of course, was a massive public scandal. When the jewelers demanded payment, the queen denied everything, and the whole plot unraveled. It ruined Rohan and badly damaged the queen's reputation, contributing to the revolutionary fervor.
It shows that the seducer's illusion, or in this case, the con artist's illusion, really only works powerfully if it targets a deep, pre-existing personal insecurity or fantasy that is desperately seeking validation. Rohan needed to believe.
Exactly.
Yeah.
His need created the opening. Okay, third key strategy in the playbook. The power of surprise and alternation. This sounds crucial. Boredom is the enemy.
The absolute enemy of seduction, according to this source. Predictability kills desire. You must constantly surprise your victims, avoid comfortable routines, keep them slightly off balance.
Keeps them paying attention.
Keeps them alert, guessing, and prevents their conscious, rational mind from settling into a comfortable pattern where it can take control back. Madame de Pompadour understood this perfectly with King Louis XV.
He was known for being easily bored, right? Inveterately bored, the source says.
Exactly. So Pompadour made it her mission to constantly surprise him. But crucially, she made each surprise different.
How so?
A new amusement one day, a new intellectual game the next, a startling new fashion, a different style of conversation, a private theatrical performance. She kept him constantly guessing what novelty she would produce next. This constant variety suspended his willpower and kept him emotionally dependent on her for stimulation.
Right, and Josephine Baker used strategic change too.
Masterfully. After initially charming Paris in the 1920s with her wild, primitive, exotic performances, the banana skirt, the crossed eyes, public interest naturally started to wane after a while. The novelty wore off.
So what did she do? Did she double down?
No. Instead of just forcing the same act, she strategically left Paris. She toured elsewhere for about a year. Then she returned. She returned completely altered. Gone was the wild jungle performer. In her place was an elegant, sophisticated, chic French woman singing romantic ballads dressed in high fashion.
A total transformation.
Total. This radical, unexpected evolution instantly recaptured the public's imagination. It showed she couldn't be predicted, couldn't be easily categorized or dismissed. The surprise guaranteed continued fascination.
Okay. Surprise, alternation keeps them hooked. Finally, we reach the final move, the summer storm. This sounds dramatic.
It is. You've laid the groundwork, built the tension, created the illusion, perhaps used surprise. Now, the source advises you must postpone satisfaction one last crucial time. Hold back just when they expect you to advance.
Why? To increase the tension even more.
To deepen the tension, make them question, make them actively pursue you, make them impatient. Then, the seducer must wait for the precise moment.
What signals that moment?
The appearance of involuntary signs of physical excitation in the target. Things like blushing, trembling, maybe rapid breathing, nervous laughter. These are signals that the body's desire has moved ahead of the conscious mind's control.
The body betrays their attempt at resistance.
In a way, yes. Once those signs are detected, then pressure must be applied, swiftly and decisively. This is the moment for the bold move.
And the source quotes Ovid here.
Yes, the ancient Roman poet of love, Ovid. His directive, paraphrased, is something like, "She may struggle, she might cry naughty, yet deep down she wants to be overcome." The idea is that resistance at this very late stage is often not true refusal, but almost a guarantee that the emotions are fully engaged and overwhelmed.
So the final action must be quick.
Executed quickly, boldly, allowing no time for second thoughts, doubts, or moral scruples to flood back into the target's conscious mind. After all the built-up tension, the waiting, the push-pull, the climax, the consummation should feel like a massive necessary release.
A storm breaking.
Exactly. Overwhelming the body before the mind can fully register protest or reassert control. The victim, in this moment, ideally loses themselves completely, and the seducer achieves, well, total victory in this psychological game. Hashtag outro. So we have completed a really deep and sometimes uncomfortable exploration of how character, strategy, and very specific psychological targeting combine to create profound influence. Seduction, viewed through this lens, is almost entirely psychological.
Right. It appeals directly to need, to lack, to fantasy.
It's highly strategic, requiring immense patience, timing, the careful construction of self-flattering illusions for the target.
And it relies entirely on managing perception and tension, doesn't it? Ambiguity, surprise, distance.
Absolutely. And before we close, maybe let's just circle back quickly to that subtle but really powerful technique we touched on, the seductive power of strategic weakness.
Ah, yes, that seemed counterintuitive. Strength can be intimidating, but vulnerability.
Vulnerability disarms. We talked about the rake using weakness, but also think about the medieval troubadours.
They didn't seduce with dominance, did they?
Not at all. They often earned the right to love, or at least the lady's attention, by showing themselves to be emotionally overwhelmed, weak, completely devoted slaves to their feelings, endlessly emoting about their unrequited love, their suffering, their service to the lady.
And this weakness was flattering.
Immensely flattering. It validates the target's power over the seducer. It says, "You have conquered me with your beauty virtue." It's the ultimate compliment, in a way, and it lowers defenses where a display of masculine strength or overt pursuit might have actually raised suspicion or fear.
So, weakness as the ultimate power move sometimes. We have detailed quite a few psychological techniques today, designed explicitly, according to the source, to bypass rational thought for the siren's cunning use of presence to the ideal lover's mirroring of desire.
And for you, the listener, the real key takeaway, perhaps, is recognition. You now possess, in effect, a detailed playbook outlining how common human vulnerabilities, desires, and aspirations can be, and often are, targeted for the purpose of persuasion, influence, or control.
So here's our final thought for you to explore on your own. If seduction, defined this broadly as the ultimate form of psychological power and persuasion, is always operating,
Right.
where do you see the techniques we discussed today? Where do you see the siren, the rake, the charismatic being applied, not just in romance, but right now in business, in politics, in mass media, in advertising?
Which narratives are currently appealing to your ego ideal? Which stories are making you feel understood or powerful? And maybe more importantly, where is the illusion of the Potemkin village strongest in our highly mediated world today? What looks real, but might just be a carefully constructed facade designed to elicit a specific emotional response?
Think about that carefully, because as you said, recognizing the strings, understanding the mechanisms, that's really the first step toward reclaiming your own psychological autonomy.
Absolutely.
And that is where we will leave our deep dive for today. We certainly hope you found this journey through a challenging text insightful.